welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd. We're so happy you could join us for the next hour of good gardening. Once again, we are not accepting any phone-in questions for the time being. You can still send us those emails and those pictures to byf@unl.edu. Tell us as much as you can about your question, and as always, tell us where you live. We hope you'll stop by our social media pages like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Pinterest. We always start with samples. So Kyle, your second show, and you've brought a dead log.
Yeah, so the log is not dead because of these, but I brought in some red-shouldered bostrichids. And you can see here, this is actually, I think, in some wild grape, but these are borers, and you can see some of that sawdust falling out here. So these beetles, they're rather small, only a few millimeters, but they emerge in the summer, and they'll go seeking out a suitable host. So they prefer wood that's declining. They'll infect a variety of different trees. They will utilize hickory, pecan, oak, redbud, a variety of others, but they really prefer hickory and pecan. But so when they find a suitable host, usually they like some twigs that are already in some state of decline. These adults will bore into it, and you can maybe see here in the center there a little bit of, well, you can actually see an adult lodged in there, but those adults will tunnel through the wood, and along the way in that tunnel they'll lay eggs and leave behind these eggs, which will then hatch later in the summer, and the larvae will start they'll start feeding on that sapwood. So in general, with a lot of these borers, unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do for, prevent or for control after they're already there. But one of the best things that you can do is preventative action. Try to prevent them from becoming an issue in the first place. These adults, you can see they cause some girdling underneath there, which can weaken these twigs and can, particularly on smaller twigs, cause twig dieback, even on healthier twigs or branches. So, the best thing to do is maintain best management practices, try to keep those trees healthy. But if you are having any dieback, you're having issues, try to prune those out, get those, remove those as soon as possible. Sanitize it to prevent there being a source of infestation.
All right, awesome. And you're probably not going to get any grapes off that twig yet.
No.
All right, Matt, let's see. Geez, you're the turf guy, and you brought some turf.
I brought a couple chunks of turf that I just ripped out of the ground. So it's obviously really hot out the last, let's say, 2 out of the 3 weeks that we've been into June, 3 weeks. Crabgrass is really not a problem that we're thinking about right now. We're thinking about that early May, late April, that we want to get our pre-emergent herbicides out. So now is actually a time, if we didn't, or if we have areas that we skipped, it would be a good time to control them because they're still fairly young and treatable. If we wait till July, then we're going to be wishing we would have controlled it, and we're going to try and control it with little success because the plants get so big so fast in the next month. So if you can see in these, this is a Kentucky bluegrass lawn that's kind of thin, and you can see like this yellowish green that's growing up in them, and that's crabgrass. So if you look over your lawn and you see this yellowish little grass coming through the lawn, that is crabgrass or foxtail. And right now it's probably in that 3 to 5 leaf stage. So what we can do is go with a post-emergent herbicide for crabgrass. There's a lot of herbicides that are labeled, some granulars even, that carry post-emergent properties on crabgrass. So if we want to control it, now is the time. Don't wait another couple weeks. But just make sure on those labels you're applying within, when we have heat like this, you don't want to be doing it in the middle of the day when it's 90 degrees, risking some burn. So there is still a chance that you can control crabgrass at this time.
It's amazing how fast it grows,
yes.
too. All right,
It'll
Jeff,
take over.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful samples.
Well, we have a few different things here. Maybe I'll just turn it as we go. So I'll start off with the one with the big leaves here. So this is bottlebrush buckeye. And so this is part of the buckeye horse chestnut family. And it's blooming right now. They're kind of a shrubby multi-cane plant, and they'll get anywhere from, I have some that are in the 6-foot range as they start flowering to they'll get well over 10, 12 feet tall eventually. So this is their thing. They're doing it right now. And then they produce a big nut at the end of the year, which is fun to plant more buckeyes with. So you don't want to eat it, but you can plant more. So we have that, and then I'm going to turn this. So we have 2 hydrangeas, and I brought these only because I think it's just fascinating. But the one here, that's oak leaf hydrangea. And then the larger one here is an Annabelle hydrangea. So what I find fascinating about this is the oak leaf blooms on old wood. So that's not a plant that I would prune in the spring. So I know everybody, again, I love to prune things. That's when I have to hold back and not prune it as much as I want to. So I don't prune that one, and it's blooming right now. And then the Annabelle, which I cut back to 18 inches, something like that, is also blooming right now. Isn't that cool? They're both blooming at the same time. One you pruned, one you didn't. So anyway.
Perfect. And they're both white.
And they're both white, yeah. So
Awesome.
anyway.
They're both excellent. That's a great combination. And those are really good plants. All of them.
Yeah, they all do well.
All right, thank you. All right, so picture questions, your first set, Kyle. Let's see, let's start with, this is a walnut question. And he was trimming some of these. He's from Omaha, and he thought this thing was a slug, and it looks just exactly almost like a branch. It's so interesting. And it's camouflaged. He wonders what it is, and does it only hang on walnut trees, and should they worry about it?
First, they shouldn't worry about it. This is the caterpillar of an underwing moth. This is on walnut, but they'll also feed on this species, also feed on pecan. And actually, there's a variety of underwing moths that will feed on those species. Yeah, they're really beautiful. I think a really interesting thing, or one thing I love about this, the genus is Catocala, and that means beautiful below. So the adults, those underwings, they're really flashy. They have these dull-colored front wings, and then the underwings are brightly colored. And similar to the adults, they'll kind of camouflage in the bark. The caterpillars will do the same thing during the day. They crawl off the leaves, and they'll just kind of hide out on the bark where they're very well camouflaged.
Very cool. All right, so now you have another. This one is a little less happy. This is a limelight hydrangea, and this is in Omaha. And she just noticed this, and she wonders what this is and how she gets rid of this and keeps it from coming back.
Yes, these are fall webworms, and as the name implies, they create this webbing, kind of like a tent that encases them, and then they feed within that. So there's a few species that will do this, but for fall webworms, they do it on the end of branches or twigs, and then they'll encase leaves in there, and they feed within that on the leaves. It looks like it's not too extensive in this situation, so what I would recommend is pruning those off wherever there's webbing, and then just destroy those. Don't leave them laying around where they can crawl back up. You can put them in a bucket of soapy water or something that'll drown them in, or you could take a branch and kind of twirl them up like you would with like cotton candy or something and dispose of it. But that's probably sufficient in this case.
All right, and then you have one more that's an ID that's just, what is this?
That looks like a yellow woolly bear caterpillar. So these turn into a tiger moth adult. This specific one is a Virginian tiger moth. So yeah, these are quite common in gardens and landscapes, and the caterpillars can range anywhere from kind of this white, like in this case, to almost black.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Excellent. All right, thank you, Kyle. Your turn next. This first one is really interesting. This is a new build home in Council Bluffs 2 years ago. Noticed the turf dying in patches. He thought grubs never spread. On investigating, he discovered they laid the sod over concrete.
Perfect.
Perfect. So the small patch in the lower left corner, he tore up a 1 foot by 2 foot piece of sod and chiseled out half of a 5-gallon bucket of solid concrete. So he's wondering, how does he repair this short of digging everything all up and starting over again, or is that his only option?
Yeah, I mean, when you have something underneath where it's restricting the root growth, let's say even along the sidewalk, if it was excess sand or gravel, you're never gonna truly fix it unless you dig it out and mediate it with new soil. So that's one way to test that would be to get basically a long, skinny rod where you can stick in the ground, and you'd be able to push it down, and you'd be able to tell if there's something that is actually stuck down there, like concrete. So you could feel around, because some of it could be just due to the heat, and it could be just droughty weather that's causing some of that. But usually you don't see them unless we have a dry spell. So a little bit more watering in those areas would help if you're not going to dig them up.
Gotta love the word deleterious material, which is what that is.
Yes.
All right, and you have a couple more, and this is actually an Albion viewer. 2 different unwanted grasses invading the lawn, and they just sent a couple of pictures, so I don't know if we can tell what these are.
In this one, I couldn't tell in the first one what the invading grass was. One looked shorter, the other one looked taller. And this one, it almost looks like windmill grass, just by the looks of it. Kind of spreads out from a central tiller and then just grows over time. Every year it's going to get bigger and bigger. So really the only way you can control that is with a non-selective control would be Roundup, spot spraying it out, or digging it out, putting in new soil, and seeding over that, and you wouldn't need a herbicide. Because there's only one selective herbicide, which would be Tenacity, that would actually work on that. And it's marginal, and you have to spray it 3 times within 30 days.
So a lot of paying attention.
Yeah, a lot of paying attention to what you're doing.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
All right, Jeff, this is a West Point gardener. She does realize that she's neglected this tree. This is one of our beautiful elms, and it's a Liberty. And she says about 10 years ago it got planted, and now she's seen it's doing this with its root system. She's pulled out all sorts of things, including I think there's a picture of the edging or the plastic and some hunks and some stakes. And so she's wondering, what would we recommend to get the base of this tree back to some health before it starts to impact the top?
Right. Well, I think she's doing the right thing by removing the edging as best she can, and I would be careful. You can cut a few smaller roots to get things out. I'm not worried about that. But if you're getting into larger roots, then you start messing with the stability of the tree and the integrity of the tree there, and with being close to the house and to the street and that sort of thing, I would worry about that. So I think you can proceed carefully and take a lot of things out and not have any issues. So with the stem girdling root system, or stem girdling roots that we have here, that would be one that I would, if you have a good certified arborist in town that you can bring in and have them take a look at it and see if that's something they can do some work on and get some of that you could try that. You could also try the Nebraska Forest Service, see if they might have someone they recommend to take a look at that and see if you could maybe do a little bit more work. Anytime you do something like that, you do take the risk of doing more damage to the tree. So
compromising it.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, thanks. And then you have another one. This is actually a Cozad viewer. This is a prospector elm, and looks pretty good from a distance, but this is what he's seeing, and he says flies, butterflies, moths on the main trunk. Looks like the bark is coming away, and when the insects are there, it looks like it's foaming at the mouth.
Yeah.
So what is this?
And this is a bacterial infection. So bacterial wetwood is what you would call it. They might refer to it sometimes as a slime sort of thing that's going on. And so what you can do with this right now, my recommendation is this is kind of giving it good care. So I want to make sure it's getting enough water. If it's a tree you want to try to keep, see if we can help it grow through this. Although it looks like we've got a pretty good infection at this stage. So that infection is kind of erupting out of it. It's found a place to push because it's building up pressure inside the tree. So you'd have to decide if that's something that you think you have some luck with, trying to make sure you give it good care and wait it out. Otherwise, maybe this is one that you just decide to cut your losses.
No fertilizer or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. All right, good. Well, gardening and landscaping are some of those things that we just love to do, and they're never set it and forget it activities. Good planning is really a great way to get that started, but as we all know, changes come about as we add new plants or take away failed experiments. For our first feature, we're going to revisit a backyard that we featured on the program 10 years ago, and we'll see how it's changed over the years. One of the things that people love to hear about and see is change over time in their landscape. And it's something they don't think about often when they are putting it in or designing it or even taking care of it. We have a great opportunity today to be able to look at Marlene Wagner's landscape change over time from 10 years. So Marlene, talk about what has happened in the past 10 years in this beautiful space.
When we were redoing the sprinkler system at the time, and we decided that, or I decided that I wanted more space to raise vegetables. And so putting in raised beds was something that I had thought about doing, and it worked out that this is the part of the yard that the sun hits, and so we put in the 3 raised beds. Have loved them, but it limited also the amount of vegetables I could grow because the plants take a lot of space. And so my raised beds, I still use them and I love them. And I rotate my crops through them, but I've also planted things outside of my raised beds. And so I have tomato plants and okra and other vegetables that I plant outside, as well as a little herb garden that's outside of the raised beds.
You also started with the idea of very deliberate placement of perennials and a handful of shrubs, and maybe they all had their own space. In the ensuing decade, have you changed your attitude about that, or have the plants changed your attitude for you about how they're going to live in your landscape?
When we first started, or when we redid all the beds or put the beds in, we had plants that were out by the street that we transplanted a bunch, like these rose bushes are from what were out on the street. And then we added some shrubs, grasses, and then I wanted perennials to place in amongst them. And actually, in a lot of ways, the beds have decided the flowers have decided where they want to be in the beds in some cases. I've let coneflower grow where it used to not be. If there was space and I didn't have anything growing there, I let it grow. I wanted this to be a cottage garden.
What are you focusing on a little differently now that you actually have grandchildren at a great distance and more time on your hands because A, you're retired, and B, we're all in our garden? Are there things that you're really doing differently now?
This year, since we've been in home a lot, I've had more time to work in the garden, and I've come out into the yard and gotten lost, and I transplant things that needed to be transplanted. Most of the things on autopilot, we've got sprays in the beds so I can put them on a timer while I'm gone and can be assured that they're going to get some water if it's hot. Otherwise, I have to let it kind of do its thing. If something is stressed when I come back, I just try to revive it back to life.
Thanks, Marlene, for sharing your space and your expertise. And we will look forward to seeing how this space changes yet again in the next 10 years. And thanks, of course, to Marlene for letting us invade her space and look at how that garden has changed. It's really a great example of being creative and changing with the seasons, and of course, changing with lifestyle, which we all kind of get to do. All right, Kyle, your next set of picture questions. The first one, this is a Wood River viewer, and these are Calibrachoa, which is related to petunias, and we're seeing in a couple of pictures here some interesting things going on. They've treated with a 3-way fungicide, insecticide, miticide. Nothing is working. What do we think is going on here?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot going on here. I was focused on the leaves before, and it looks like maybe there's some powdery mildew or something going on there. Maybe thinning that out to increase airflow. Watering in the morning could help with that. But then I hadn't noticed it, but Kim pointed out the buds, and it looks like there's some flower damage there by budworms. Those are tough to control. Maybe pinching those off. Using BTK may be effective for those, but those are going to be tough.
Right, especially since they hide in there, and you don't know you've got them until the flowers are gone. So, all right, thank you, Kyle. Your next one is Tarnov, Nebraska, which is in Platte County. transplanted some rhubarb plants. Something is gnawing away on them. They are in a brome area, and the brome was sprayed with Roundup prior to planting. So,
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. Rhubarb normally doesn't have too many pest issues. Sometimes some slugs, maybe, but I don't think that's a slug issue here. I think maybe the brome and spraying that before is the key here, and it makes me suspicious that it maybe could be cutworm or true armyworms here. True armyworms, right now would really be something I'd maybe be paying attention for. Because they'll normally, they'll use grasses as a host, but then when those are removed, when they're sprayed or killed off, whatever, or they exhaust it, then they'll move on to other hosts. They like to kind of hide down in the soil during the day, so you might scrape around in the soil, see if you can find any caterpillars hiding down in there, and then look in the evening, see if anything's coming on to feed then. If you do find caterpillars, something like carbaryl, permethrin, or a BT again could work for those.
all right, the Roundup didn't help probably on this one.
Yeah.
And your next one here is, this is an Omaha viewer. She has these tiny little things that look like mites on her serrano peppers.
Yeah, so these are aphids here. You can see some of them kind of have the yellowish color. Those are the actual aphids. Then there's kind of these white specks there. Those would be the caskins or the exuvi as they shed their skin and leave those behind. And then you can see kind of some shiny areas on the surface. That's the honeydew. So they feed on that sap, and basically it's largely just sugar, and a lot of that just gets passed right through and collects on the leaf there. So for aphids, insecticidal soaps tend to work very well for aphids. So that's a good option. I would probably start with that. You could also try horticultural oil or neem, but I'd probably go with the insecticidal soap.
Excellent, thank you, Kyle. All right, a couple of weed questions for you, Matt. The first is, this viewer is in Omaha. He thinks he's identified honeyvine milkweed. It's both in the lawn and in his landscape beds.
Yes, and I think he is correct on the honeyvine milkweed. It has those white veins kind of in between the dark spots of the leaf, I guess you could say. So that's one way to identify it, and it has a heart shape. So the other one that it could be in the lawn or landscape would be field bindweed, but it does not have that white venation within the veins.
And he controls this how? In his turf and in his beds?
Actually, this is one you're probably going to want to pull out before it starts growing, because it'll grow really quick. You get 10 feet, it'll actually take over fences. The neat thing about this one is it does make a big seed pod, almost like milkweed. So it's actually a food for monarch. So some people actually plant it and keep it there, but it will take over. So you don't want those seeds to spread, because they turn into fluff and they'll fly around the lawn, and you'll have them everywhere for years to come. So make sure you pull them out.
All right, excellent. And your next one says he's got this spreading from the seed pod on the bottom, and he's showing us a really good picture of this. He wants to know what this is and how and when to control it.
Yes, so wild violet, and yes, it does have almost like three little feet that pop open, and those seeds spread out right at the bottom there. So it's a little too late. You're going to have this problem for years to come, because there's seed there. But if you do want to get a control on it, right now probably isn't a good time to treat for this one. Wait till later, let's say September, and don't go out with just 2,4-D alone. Get a product that has, let's say, triclopyr in it, which is, a lot of them are labeled for violet, and that'll do a lot better job of controlling that weed for the next season. And you might have to treat it again next season, because there's already seed there. It's going to germinate. You'll have more next year.
All right, thank you, Matt. All right, Jeff, we have some tree questions for you. The first one here is a Missouri Valley, Iowa viewer. It is an ash, probably a autumn purple or something. Had to take off the branch. She wonders about what to do to save this tree.
Yeah, unfortunately, that would not be a tree that you could save at this stage.
No.
So it will only, even if that wound would heal, we would continue to get weight up high, and now we have a very unstable tree that could be very dangerous. So I would take it out now and replace it.
That's a goner.
Yeah.
All right. And now you have one that is a Creighton, Nebraska viewer.
Right.
This is an autumn blaze maple in the front yard, 20 years old, a 40-foot canopy, big split in the main trunk. They've chained it, and they're wondering if they can save the tree by bolting those two trunks together.
I think, again, this is a tree that I would go ahead and replace. I don't think we would want to, it's already locked up. It's being punished for having bad growth pattern.
Yeah.
So, and this is a tree, so with both these trees, these are things that as owners of these trees, we want to watch and make sure that as we see this kind of branching habit, that we take those branches out early on so that we avoid the included bark and the weakness of the branch connection and then damage from a storm or something like that.
Right.
So,
and isn't it true that when you see branches that are more than half the diameter of the main trunk, that's a real bad
right.
signal?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Right.
Yeah, so a start over, and then you have one more that's hopefully not a start over. 25 to 30 foot swamp oaks have some branches broken, some leaves are drooping and falling off, really only on the west side of these trees.
Right.
So what do we think here?
I'm guessing it's probably a weather damage. If it's on the west side, if it's all on the west side, and whether we had some strong straight line winds come in and do some damage. So I would go ahead and prune the broken branches out. If you have some leaves, and maybe just kind of go through and check and make sure that there isn't something in the canopy that is also broken. You may have something kind of hidden in there if we've had that kind of damage. So do some pruning and you should be fine.
Yeah, and they look pretty healthy.
Yeah, it looks very healthy.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, with all our plants in the ground and growing in our garden, it's now time to do a little management. Let's take a few minutes to hear from Terry James out of the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, everything's done. Mulch is on, everything's getting watered, irrigation system on. Like we talked about last week, we were pinching things back so that things are gonna get a little bit more bushy and stay a little bit shorter. So now we're actually looking at some of our perennial stuff, kind of some of that time to start looking at some of that and deciding whether or not you wanna cut some of that back, both to delay flowering and to stop some of that stuff from flopping over when it gets too big. So some of the bigger asters, some of the sedums, make that decision now. Now is the time of year to kind of be thinking about that. Don't have to be fancy, just take your pruners and just kind of clip some of those off. You'll actually benefit further into fall. You'll have a later bloom and things won't flop. So stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden and check it out.
Right now, of course, it is time for the lightning round. You ready, Jeff?
I'm ready.
Okay. This is a Hupper viewer.
Okay.
They have 60-year-old trees that are showing some dieback. They have not gotten a lot of rain. They're wondering, should they really be watering these big old trees?
Yeah, it can't hurt to water some trees. So, and I know they're big trees, this could be a lot of water, so there may be kind of that sort of thing that you're worried about that. I would think that the water table is high in Hupper, so, but I would look at some of the dieback and see if there's something else going on.
All right. This is a Hershey viewer who wonders whether glyphosate will hurt asparagus after you cut the asparagus.
Yes.
Okay. This is a Lincoln viewer. There were some stumps that were sprayed with Garlon 4, and they're seeing leaf curl. Can they harvest and eat the greens, the peppers, the tomatoes?
No.
Okay, this is a Shelby, Iowa
I
viewer.
like these questions. Good. Keep going.
Shelby, Iowa viewer, tomatoes, oaks, and lilacs are all showing curling. Herbicide or something else?
If it's that many different things, I would say it's probably a herbicide.
All right. White oaks in St. Edward have crispy leaf tips. Any ideas on that one?
It's probably weather. We've had our fluctuating temperatures, cool and wet, now hot and dry and windy would cause that.
All right, excellent. Nice job. Ready?
Yeah, let's get more than 5, I guess, right?
Let's see, I better write some more real quick. All right, this is also a Hershey viewer wondering whether glyphosate will kill windmill grass.
Yes.
All right. We have an Omaha viewer who wonders about treating black medic now and says they have a whole lot of it.
Black medic right now, any clover right now is really tough. I would wait and treat it when it's easier to control later in the fall.
All right, and this particular viewer also wants to know what to use on it.
A lot of the 3-4-way products, but obviously most of them contain dicamba now, so I wouldn't be spraying them.
All right, we have a Lodgepole, Nebraska viewer who wants to plant Kentucky bluegrass now. They do have an irrigation system, yes or no?
No.
Okay. A Blair viewer wants to know, what is a yard lacking if they're constantly having to add iron to their space?
Iron. Now, if it's yellow, it's probably some iron deficiency, but it's obviously just a lack of nutrients in general. The soil is not very good.
So you would recommend?
There are some organics that you can put into it, or just fertilizing a little bit more often.
Or a soil test.
Yeah, that would help. That would actually tell you what's wrong with it.
All right. Okay, you ready, Kyle?
I'm ready.
All right. This is a Geneva viewer who has a black walnut tree and something is eating all the leaflets and leaving little tiny black frass dots. Any ideas?
Oh, pass, I'm not sure.
Okay. Picture would be good, right?
Yeah.
This is a Carney viewer who wonders, they want to use a preventative spray for bagworms. Is that a possibility?
Well, no, you probably wouldn't want to use a preventative, but there's, bagworms are out now, so it's definitely the time to be treating now.
All right. Yellow, brown, and black wasps all over in this person's Omaha garden. They've tried sprays and they've tried traps. Any other options?
No, I'd let them go. They're probably paper wasp, and they're probably killing caterpillars there.
All right. There is a tiny insect leaving frass on asters. This is a Lincoln viewer. What do we think that is?
Probably a lace bug. Those can maybe be controlled with probably like neem or an insecticidal soap.
Okay, Japanese beetles are feasting. How do we control?
Yeah, Japanese beetles are out. There's a lot of different options. Neem is an option, won't give as long a protection. Pyrethrins, not as long. Carbaryl, permethrin. Depends on what they're feeding on too.
Tennis racket.
Tennis racket,
Yeah.
soapy water.
Yeah.
No traps.
Yeah.
Right? Excellent. Nice job, all. All right, Jeff, it's kind of slim pickings for prettiness right now.
Well, we have two interesting plants here, two
Yeah.
kind of fun plants. So I'll talk about the purple one in flower right now. So that's lead plant, and that is a plant that's native really across the state of Nebraska. I would call it kind of a sub-shrub. In certain places they can get, 3-4 feet tall. My in-laws had a prairie that was covered in lead plants, so it was always fun. We'd collect seeds off of that and grow seedlings. So anyway, it's a fun plant to have, and it'll set like a little pod, with the seeds in it. So it's a legume. Then the other plant we have here is verbena, white vervain. And this can be quite large. So like 1.5 to 6 feet tall in the right conditions. I suppose in a taller prairie, it's going to get a little taller. And this is, many times you'll see it in purple, so it's a little unusual to see it in white. But so another native prairie plant you'll find, through Iowa, Illinois, all the way into Nebraska. So both fun plants.
And hot, dry soil, and in the backyard farmer garden,
Okay.
both of them, so people can go see.
Again, when we have people looking for something that they don't have irrigation and want some flowers, here's two plants that would do it.
Exactly. Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. All right, Kyle, picture questions for you. We have all sorts of interesting IDs, I think. The first one, this is a Hastings viewer, or north of Hastings. She says this pest is everywhere. Foundations, they're in the house. They've tried an exterminator. They've tried vinegar. They're now trying bifenthrin. They're only pinpoint size.
Yeah, sounds like springtails. And I would probably lay off the spraying. These are decomposers. They really need moist environment. So it probably suggests that there's maybe too much moisture in some of those areas. I would focus on trying to correct that. Let those areas dry out. If it's inside, maybe use of a dehumidifier can help.
All right, excellent. Boy, they nasty for pinpoint, right? All right, so then we have, I think we got about 5 different people sending us this, and from all over the state. And the first one is, would you please identify this colorful little dude or dudette?
Yeah, this is looks like the nymph of a wheel bug. So this is the immature stage. They're one of the largest assassin bugs that we have, and these are beneficial. They're especially at this stage, they're probably feeding on small caterpillars predominantly. As they get larger, the adults will take down just about anything they can, including Japanese beetles. But yeah, these are beneficial. It's good to have these.
Excellent. All right, your next ID is, this is Omaha, and what is this, was her question.
Yeah, this is a bagworm caterpillar. So I'm not sure what it's doing here.
It's on her deck.
Why it's on the deck. I guess that's good. It looks like maybe it was in a deciduous tree. That's not quite as bad as if it's on evergreen, since the deciduous trees can replace their leaves next year. But yeah, you probably want to look into control if you have these around. Now, kind of, I would really consider it right now if you're having, if you have a history of these, or if you see them. Once they start getting a little bit larger in July, control becomes, really impractical or impossible. So treat now. There's a variety of options. BT. You can even use, Carbaryl or something like that too, but BT is pretty good. I'd start there.
Excellent. And then you have a final one. This is a Missouri Valley, Iowa viewer. They have these inverted funnels in their yard. And she's tried cinnamon and 7 powder and pouring water down the hole. They just move the hole, and nobody's ever seen anything go in or out.
Yes, these are the larvae of antlions. So leave these alone. You don't want to kill these. They're not going to cause any sort of harm. They're not going to injure your plants or anything. The adults look kind of like dragonflies or damselflies, but with longer antennae. And the the immatures, they construct those pits, and then when an ant or an unsuspecting insect walks in, they trap it in that little pit and have a meal of it. So they're pretty cool.
Sounds like Sarlacc on Star Wars.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, thanks. That was fun, Kyle. This is Valparaiso, and we have 3 pictures from this viewer. Every year they get these 2 runoff dead patches, full sun. The grass is mulch mowed. They're parallel and green in the spring. They die in the summer. No difference in the turf. They're wondering if this is leach field from septic system, and would that make the soil too acidic? And how do they keep it green?
Yeah, it sure does look like, there's a good picture with the septic tank lids there, and then the 2 laterals, which are probably buried about, 3 feet, 2.5, 3 feet down. So yeah, you're seeing these drier spots on top. I don't know if it would necessarily be acidic, more or less just water issues, because you have a restriction that those roots can't go any deeper. So they're getting on top of that lateral, and they stop. So when we have dry weather like we've had, you'll start to see that yellowing. So really the only thing that might help would be watering those strips or that area a little bit more to keep it from turning that yellow color.
All right, thank you, Matt. Okay, we have some spruce issues, and we can talk landscape, and you can mention the others. The first one here is, this is Baccarii blue in Gretna. Wondering maybe this was weed killer overspray on these, because the rest of them, they don't really see the ends. I think we have a picture here of the closer up of the ends.
Okay. Yeah. It might be overspray. What it probably is weather related. So with the cool weather we had in May, and then with the winds and dryness that we've had here throughout July, and our fluctuating temps. So we're going to see a lot of that with some plants. The Nebraska Forest Service, Lori Stepanek, sent out an email late this afternoon talking about how, it appears this is really weather related and not a disease or insect related at this time. So.
Okay. We have a Brainerd viewer who has also sent a picture, and this is a little different issue.
Right.
Growth tips died on a couple of the others. What do they do about this?
So again, this is more likely a disease issue. And this is one where if you are intent on keeping the tree, go out and prune out as much of the dead as possible, so it's not going to grow anything from that tissue's dead, so we should get that out of there. And you're going to want to go below that. You may take out a couple live branches just to make sure we get everything out and open it up.
All right. And then your final one here is from Hastings. She's got 2 of these, one old, one new, and they are showing this tip stuff again, Jeff.
And again, I think it's probably, some winds and plants that were in a very active growth pattern from our May. And then the tissue wasn't able to deal with sudden change in climate.
Right. It's been kind of an interesting, brutal year, hasn't it?
Right, right.
All right. Well, we've enjoyed our backyard farmer garden over the years and our most recent edition of the Rain Chain. It's really given us a chance to learn a few things and show you what's possible. Sometimes plants and ornamentals won't sit still. If you are not careful, they will start popping up everywhere. When gardeners choose plants for their landscape, they often have something particular in mind for what they want that plant to do. And depending on your gardening style, you may want those plants to stay put in a simple space, nice tidy little plants, or you may just want them to run and do whatever they want to do. We're going to take a look today at a combination of plants that have become overly enthusiastic in our rain chain, in our courtyard, and I'm concentrating on perennials and a couple of annuals. What we have happening is enthusiasm on the part of the plants, starting with the genetics of the beast. How does it actually reproduce? So we're talking about plants that spread by seed, plants that run either by stolons or rhizomes, and then that combination of plants that can do both of those different things. So perfect example here is one of the annuals. This is larkspur. Beautiful plant in flower, started from one plant 2 years ago, has seeded itself almost all the way around one of our gardens in our rain chain. People love milkweed. We love milkweed. This is one that really is ubiquitous in terms of coming up in all sorts of spaces. So depending on what you're after, you're going to have to watch these plants very carefully. Liatris has done the same thing. It's a beautiful plant. Not necessarily all over the place, because what can also happen with perennials and annuals that really want to take over the world is if they are stronger, more aggressive, they can displace some of those other plants you want, and then you end up without the variety or the diversity in your landscape that you may be after. A handful of our penstemons have done the same thing, and again, some of them need to reseed themselves so they will remain in the landscape. But one of the ones that really has shown its true colors is a handful of the sedges. Palm sedge in particular has become very, very happy in many places, including all the way up at the top of the hill where we didn't plant it. So take a look at what you've got, watch it, especially as our weather changes, our environment changes, as your soil improves, as your management techniques change, and make sure plants that you don't want to escape and seed or run all over the place are staying where you want them. This is really a great example of how good plants that you enjoy can suddenly sneak up and start choking out a lot of the rest of your landscape. And of course, the key is to keep a sharp eye out for anything out of place. Give it to somebody else. Yeah. Jeff, I think you want some of that sedge. You are welcome to it.
Let's deal with it.
All right, Kyle, you have a viewer from Columbus who found this in the flower stalks of a yucca from last year. He even used the word exuviae in his email. So what is this and what does it turn into?
These are great pictures, and this is really interesting. So these, I believe, are the exuviae, the remaining skins that were left behind from emerging bogus yucca moss. So yucca moss have a mutually beneficial relationship with yucca. They're the only known pollinators of yucca, and then in the process they'll leave their larvae behind and they'll feed on the developing seeds of yucca. But these moths have sort of exploited that relationship, and they develop in the vegetative parts of yucca, in this case the flower stalk. And so that's what's emerging out right here.
That's really cool. He sent great pictures.
Yeah.
And then your next one is kind of a head scratcher. This viewer is in Bellevue. She sent these tiny white eggs all over the vertical sides of the deck. And sometimes 3 of them were together in a straight line, and we can see it in there. She didn't want to spray them, so she used an organic sort of a thing. Any idea what these are?
Unfortunately, I have no idea. I could come up with some stories, but I don't know if they'd be any good. So it's a mystery. I don't know. I would say spraying, most eggs aren't that susceptible to insecticides anyway, so probably good not to spray. I would have just washed them or scraped them off or something.
I think he needs to make up a word, and we'd all believe it.
Put them in a jar.
Next time around. All right.
Yeah.
All right, Matt. This is an Elkhorn viewer. Complete takeover is happening in the garden and then creeping into his turf. He thinks it's purslane. He's tried hoeing, tilling, hand pulling, comes back stronger.
No.
Is this purslane? And what if he puts compost on top of it and hoes it? Or how do you kill it in the lawn? Or what do you do with purslane besides eat it?
Yeah, you could actually eat it.
Yeah.
It looked like it was in a nice row there. You could actually just let it go and put it with your salad, and it would actually probably be pretty good. But the looks of it is that you have so much seed there that hoeing it up and moving it around is not going to control it. So you almost need a thicker mat in order to basically snuff it out. So one thing I've used in my garden, and if it works there, you could use clippings from a lawn as long as they weren't treated with herbicide, and put those on at 1.5 to 2 inches thickness, and they should help keep that out of there and also hold in the moisture. Because really there's no, your idea of the compost on top would also work if you can bury it, but every time you dig in there, you're going to be stirring that seed up, and purslane is a very prolific seed producer, so if you can get it to basically keep it out, you can start controlling it.
Then you have a Lincoln viewer who sent in a couple of pictures. This is the strip between curb and sidewalk. It's got all these weeds in it, and I think we have 2 pictures here, and clover. It isn't irrigated. They want to keep the clover but kill the rest. How can you keep the one and get rid of the... And they want to know what this one is, too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the green one is broadleaf plantain mixed in with white clover, and then you have a little bit of maybe some common ragweed in there as well. Clover is actually not very well controlled with 2,4-D. It doesn't work very well to control it, so I don't know if I would treat it now to control it, but I would wait maybe until we have a little bit cooler weather, and the 2,4-D should work pretty well on most of them, and set the clover back just a little bit, but it will come back because it's marginally good on it.
Okay, so it's kind of a losing battle on that one.
Yes. I mean, if you want to keep the clover, then you
Right.
should be able to.
All right. Jeff, this is a Lincoln viewer. They have an east slope between a sidewalk and a parking lot, and that is one heck of a slope. Planted decades ago, mature evergreens. This is honeysuckle, probably Hall's honeysuckle. They keep trimming it off the sidewalk. She's finding a lot of dead under the healthy layer. She's wondering how she gets the dead out, or how she rejuvenates this without compromising the integrity of the slope itself.
Right. Yeah, that's tough, and they've already done quite a bit of pruning to it. I don't know if this would be the time of year that I would be doing, you could cut the honeysuckle back severely. We've mowed it off in areas, clean up the area, and then it'll come right back. And that's something I would do in the spring. I wouldn't do it this time of year. Especially if we do have some heavy rain and that sort of thing, we'll have some erosion and it won't recover quite as quickly. So I think I'd hold off on doing anything other than doing what you can, cleaning it up as best you can, but it looks healthy, so.
Okay, and then again, doing a major cutback in the...
Right, and it'll sucker, so it's going in and digging out some of those plants along the edge so that we kind of eliminate some of that.
Right.
You can move it around, so.
Give it to your neighbors.
Right.
All right, and your next one is actually kind of a fun one here. This is an Omaha viewer. He's worried about what's causing these tomatoes to turn purple at the top, starting when they're still young.
Right. Well, there's a couple things here. The first one, the simple one, may be a phosphorus issue, which could be, again, caused by our fluctuating weather conditions that can cause that in tomato plants. And that would be the one that I would try to treat as best I can. So that means making sure that we have good moisture, and if you haven't been fertilizing this, using a kind of a balanced fertilizer on it to see if we can help with that. What it also might be is our curly top virus. And that's spread by leafhoppers, and so that's something that we may see. So if we continue to see the curling of the leaves, that would tell me that maybe what we have is the virus going on.
And there's a third option.
Okay.
There is actually a tomato variety called Midnight Snack
Right.
that starts out like that on the top, but not
Okay.
the foliage. So,
Right.
yeah.
And I thought that too.
Yeah.
My one thought is the curling leaves is
Right.
making me think maybe we've got something else going on here.
Right. Yeah.
That's why I would say let's try with, making sure it's got everything it's needed.
Right.
Hopefully it grows out of it.
Right. Excellent. Fun. And to have the dollar bill behind it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, we have announcements of things going on in the gardening world, of course, always. And our first one is it is National Pollinator Week, June 22nd to 28th. We've put the entomology website up for you because they have all sorts of great information about pollinators, of course, as you would well expect, bug guy. And then, of course, Digging Deeper with Backyard Farmer. You can watch us on Facebook, Thursdays at 8 o'clock. Follow Backyard Farmer in NET, Nebraska. Give us your comments about all the interesting things that we talk about on Digging Deeper. So, other things going on in the gardening world, of course, but that's all what everybody kind of wants to do on their own.
Yeah.
So, all right, Kyle, you have a question, and this is actually a viewer who wonders, they've seen some big iridescent green beetles right now, and of course they're wondering, are those Japanese beetles or are they something different? They're big, great big, like big.
Great big, then probably not Japanese beetles.
Is there a green June beetle of some sort?
Green June bug.
Yeah,
That would be maybe. Yeah.
I haven't seen any of those out yet, but yeah, it could be. They're not quite as iridescent, but yeah, they're pretty unmistakable. If you see them flying around, they sound like a bumblebee or something.
Right.
And they should be out soon if they're not already.
All right, excellent. All right, Matt, you also have a question. This particular viewer has purchased flats and flats and flats of buffalo grass plugs
Yes.
and has been keeping them alive in the plug trays. Is this a time to plant those? How do you manage those once you get them in the ground right
Yeah,
now?
you want to plant them sooner than later because if you leave them in those little cell packs or trays, they're going to just keep getting more and more root bound. So those roots will it'll be tougher for them to spread out and grow if you don't plant them soon. What you could do, if you can't do that, is cut them in half and replant them, and that would give them a chance to set new roots before you can plant them. But now would be the time to do that, not later, because we'll get too late in the year to actually get them established.
Okay, and then once they're sliced and diced and put in the ground, is it a watering 3 times a day kind of a thing, or?
Yes, with this heat, there's that transplant shock when you first put them in the ground, so you
Right.
want to make sure that they do have adequate moisture, at least for that first 2 weeks, until if you pull one up and they're starting to set new roots, then you can probably back off a little bit, but you don't want to let them dry out completely.
All right, excellent. Jeff, in about 20 seconds or less, should people be looking hard at watering their landscape plants in this coming week?
Absolutely. I think anything that's probably 2 years or younger, you should be out watering and checking them. Giving them the screwdriver test, making sure things aren't already too wet in certain places. We all have wet spots in our garden, so.
Right, excellent. And the screwdriver test means don't just stand there, go like this, and think it's enough water, right?
Right.
Exactly.